Hello, Kardec Radio. We are streaming live on the Kardec Radio Facebook page, and also, of course, we're streaming live on Kardec Radio, which you can get on your Android or Apple phone. You can load up the Kardec Radio app by the Play Store or the Apple Store. So you can get it for free. So please get 24 hours a day Spiritist programs by many other people and wonderful messages from a whole group of us here in all around the world, giving Spiritist programs for you on Kardec Radio. Now, but tonight on Sunday, we are continuing our talking about the Gospel according to Spiritism, brought to you by Allan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism. But before I begin, remember, I will load this video up into my YouTube and BitChute channels. Please comment, hit the little thumbs up, and subscribe to YouTube or BitChute. That helps the algorithm, so we can spread Spiritism to more and more people. So Allan Kardec, this was his third book. The first, of course, was the Spirits book, which I recommend everyone to read. You can get that in PDF as well as this book too, The Gospel According to Spiritism. Today, we're going to talk about something. It's one of the hardest ones, at least was for me, and that is when Jesus says, "Love your enemies." Now, this is chapter 12 in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism. And let's talk about this because, when you say love your enemies, I'm not going to love my enemy. Well, even they say, you don't have to. So let me get into this deeper. And this is what's so great about Allan Kardec, The Gospel According to Spiritism. It makes sense. It brings to what Jesus said, and it brings to what in our modern ears, in our modern understanding, it really tells us what's happening. So let me first go through Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 to 47, where you hear the phrase, "Ye have heard that it has been said, that thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what more do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so?" So he's telling us to love our enemies. And if God loves everybody, God sends food and rain to us, then shouldn't we all? This is what Allan Kardec writes. If the principle of charity is to love one's neighbors, then to love one's enemies is the most sublime application of the same principle, seeing that the possession of this virtue represents one of the greatest victories which can be achieved against selfishness and pride. Now, I'm quoting Allan Kardec here on chapter 12. I'll continue. However, there is usually a misunderstanding in relation to the meaning of the word love in this situation. When he spoke, Jesus did not mean that each one of us should have the same tenderness for an enemy as would be felt for a brother, sister, or friend. Tenderness presupposes confidence. Well, no one can deposit confidence in another person knowing that they bear malice. No one can show effusive friendship knowing that the other person is likely to abuse the situation. Between people who have no confidence among themselves, there cannot be the same manifestations of a sympathy which exists between those who share the same ideas. In short, no one can feel the same pleasure when they are with an enemy as they would felt when in the company of a friend. The diversity of feelings in these two very different circumstances is the result of a physical law, which is the assimilation and repulsion of vibrations. An evil thought produces a vibrationary current, which causes an unpleasant situation, an impression. A good thought encompasses us with very agreeable emanation. This is the reason for the different sensations which are experienced on the approximation of a friend or an enemy. So we stop there for a second. So he tells us a lot of things in here. And first, to love, he's not saying you have to love like, oh, I love you, I'll do anything for you. And he hasn't gotten what the difference is in yet, but he's already taken that off the table. The second interesting thing is that, yes, with someone, you somehow you pick up when someone doesn't like you, and somehow you also pick up when someone does like you. And that is because, he says, an evil thought produces a vibrationary current, also a good thought. It shows you that in our minds, that we radiate our thoughts throughout the universe constantly, right? As I've talked about this before, all our thoughts are tagged with our unique ID. Our ID, like a RFID chip, right? It's tagged with that ID, or like your cell phone. Whenever you call your cell phone, your number's in there and it goes to whatever person you're calling from tower to tower to tower. Well, your thoughts do the same. And many of us, even though now empaths probably much better than, most of us, I'm not an empath, but they can pick up people's feelings and vibrations. And that's something that they have probably a more advanced, pineal gland that picks up those things. But even there's something that feels that within us. So we can get other people's thoughts, just like kind of like mobs too, or all of a sudden everyone thinks the same thing. And it's not just all visual cues. It's something that's in the subconscious that we kind of understand, but we don't really, comprehend like we should. So this happens, right? You will see someone or know someone and you get an instant dislike. Now, a lot of that also comes from a past life experience with your instinct, right? Because when you are born, you have your conscience, which has been built up in thousands and thousands of lives and thousands of years, and your instinct. And your instinct could say, oh, that person, don't trust that person. Now, it doesn't work all the time. A lot of people fool us because we never had any previous communication with them in previous lives. But some people, you will pick that up immediately. And that's Allan Kardec is telling us that, we will feel these vibrations. And the more you understand and study Spiritism, and the more you start learning to open yourself to the signs and signals of the spirit world, you'll be surprised how you can start picking up different things. This is why study is so important. Okay. So, then he says, now, so then to love one's enemy cannot signify that there should be no difference between the affection for an enemy and that for a friend. If this precept seems difficult to put in practice, perhaps impossible, this is only because it was falsely understood that Jesus has ordered us to give both friends and enemies an equal place in our hearts. Seeing that the restrictions of the human language oblige us to use the same term to express different shades of a sentiment, it is then necessary to establish these differences according to the various cases. Therefore, this is what Allan Kardec has written, to love one's enemies does not mean showing affection, which would not be within our nature, as contact with an enemy makes our heart beat in an entirely different manner to the way it beats on contact with a friend. To love one's enemy means we should not hate nor bear rancor against them. Now, this is the important part. Nor desire vengeance. It means to forgive all the evil they have caused without hidden thoughts and without conditions. It means to not put obstacles in the way of a reconciliation and to wish them well instead of bad things. It is to feel joy instead of regret at the good things that may come their way, to help them whenever possible, and to abstain by words or acts from everything which might prejudice them. Finally, it means to always return goodness for evil without any intention to humiliate. Whoever can proceed in this manner fulfills the condition of the commandment, love your enemies. Now, this is wonderful advice. And this is what it is forgive the evils they do to you. So let's look at this for a second. And let's go here. Let's talk about karma. Now, When you have enemies in your life, it's because they have been assigned there to help you. So let's talk about karma for a second. So the first step is your previous life. Everything is recorded. It's like right now it's recorded. Everything, every detail, every thought. Number two, let me bring this up so you can see it better for a second. I am sorry about this. Number two is results from your previous life determine the plans for your current life. And that's the trials and all the episodes. That's what I have covered up with my picture. So your trials and episodes of your current life were determined by your actions in your previous life, and some of them even before then, if you haven't really learned the lesson. So that person who is your enemy, you know that, and you may think, why does that person hate me? Well, they may have an extremely good reason. So let's look at it at two different levels. They may personally have a good reason to want to do something to you, which they don't understand. But they have this feeling that you are their enemy and they don't trust you or wishes to do you harm. And that is from their instinct that maybe you both did something bad to each other, right? I mean, you have to admit, as we go further and further back in our previous lives, we were less and less kind people, right? We probably took what we wanted and did whatever we could. So that's personal. So, and then each one of you may have wanted to get justice on your own terms. And again, this is what Allan Kardec will, talks about later in the chapters. You don't need to get justice, right? There is a court that will always take care of all justice in the world, and that is God and the spirit kingdom. And karma is the process of that court. Whatever that person did wrong, they will have to go through trials and tribulations to unlearn that behavior, right? To remove that primitive emotion and those primitive behavior patterns and replace them with something better. Now, for the hard truth is you has probably have done the same, and you are going through these trials and tribulations to remove your past mistakes. So if we look at it that way, now let's look at it as our personalized little process. That person who's doing something that you may think harmful to you, he or she is your enemy, is doing it on one level because they want to, but on another level is they've been put in that position to do you harm by the machinations and manipulations of the spirit world. Easily, if the spirit world didn't want you to meet your enemy, they could have been born in, on the opposite side of the planet. It'd be easy for the spirit world to say, no, we never want these two people to meet. They'll make life miserable for each other. Well, no, they didn't make that decision, did they? They made a decision, no, these two need to work out their problems. Or this person needs to learn a lesson, and we just have the person to give them that lesson. So, as I've said before, you have to look at that person who's doing something to you as an assigned actor in a play that's fulfilling a part for your benefit. Now, you may not think of it as your benefit at that point in time. Believe me, I sure didn't think that way. I'm learning to, but that is why they were there, right? Because if spirit world never wanted you to meet, it wouldn't happen. Now, this is the third level of this when Jesus says, love your enemies. Now, Jesus says, he's not saying love your enemies just to be a nice person, which he is, but it's also because this is all going to make a difference in the future life. So I just had a question, which I think is a good one, is what if a spouse betrays you? I know I will forgive, but it is okay to remove yourself from the relationship. Exactly. That's exactly what Allan Kardec said is let me just quote this again, because that's a very good question. And that's a perfect thing if someone does what your harm is. It means to love one's enemy means we should not hate nor bear rancor against them, nor desire vengeance. It means to forgive. This I'm quoting Allan Kardec. It means to forgive all evil they have caused. It means not to put obstacles in the way of reconciliation, to wish them well. So now he's not saying, oh no, you have to invite them for lunch whenever and go over to their, no, you don't, you can remove yourself. And in fact, I tell that to many people is, if you're going through a bad divorce or relationship, don't say bad things about that other person, especially if you have children. Just treat them professionally. And of course, we talked about that when the meek shall inherit the earth. What they're really talking about is you handle stressful situations. And when Jesus said meek, it really means that you handle in a calm, precise manner. With you focus your energies, right? You can become indignant, but you don't become angry. So that's what that means. So, and that is important because let's say your previous life, probably, I hate to say this, but whatever that husband or wife did to you, guess what? You probably did to someone else, maybe the same person, who knows? But these are learning experiences. So, you just kind of have to laugh about them. You go, oh well. And just know from that not to do that anymore. So it's not easy. Now, let's get back to what I was talking about is there's the next level, which is, as you remember, in the spirit world, there's no concept of, there's time is different, right? They can see time. And so when he says, love your enemies, that is reconcile with them, just as Allan Kardec said, and make it so you're not enemies. You don't have to be best buddies, but you can at least be neutral to each other. And this is important because how karma works. Your future life, the less enemies you make, if you can make none, and if you can reconcile with some, that sets you up in your future life, because your life now is recorded and will be used to determine your next life. And in fact, this was borne out. This is a wonderful book, Planetary in Transition by Divaldo Franco. And I recommend that to everyone. And there's a part in that they were talking about people coming from an advanced planet incarnating on Earth. And this is around, I think, around the beginning of the 2000s, not that long ago. It was the tsunami, and around Thailand and that area, and so they were coming to Earth to become politicians and doctors and scientists to help us. And the question was asked, well, are they going to have a life full of trials and tribulations like the rest of us on Earth? And they go, well, they're coming from a higher planet. They don't need to go through these karmic phases. They don't need to have trials and tribulations. They will have the regular flus and colds, that type of stuff, right? They'll have the regular minor diseases, but they won't have the turbulent personal life. They won't have the car accidents that, bangs up their leg and makes them lame. They won't have, some sort of, cancer, things like that. They won't experience that because they don't need to. This is where you want to get yourself, right? This is where you want it. This is if you can proactively use karma, everything you're doing in this life is setting up your next life. So, and this is why love your enemies is not an easy process, right? But it is an effective one to make yourself have vast improvement in your next life. So then he goes on with, to those who are incredulous, this is Allan Kardec, loving an enemy is contradiction. For those to whom the present life is everything, an enemy is someone noxious who perturbs their rest and from whom, as is thought, only death can bring liberation. This is a reason for desiring vengeance. These people are not interested in forgiving unless it is to satisfy their pride before the world. In certain other cases, the act of pardon seems to them to be a weakness in which they will not stoop. And even if they do not reap vengeance, they will certainly retain rancor and evil desires against the other person. For the believer, and above all for the spiritist, the way of looking at this situation is very different because their vision extends over the past and into the future, between which the present life is nothing more than a point in time. The Spiritist knows that due to the peculiar destiny of this planet, meeting with evil and perverse people is to be expected. The wickedness to be faced is all part of the ordeals to be supported. From this elevated point of view, the vicissitudes are easier to bear, less bitter, whether they originate from other fellow beings or from things. If they do not complain to themselves of their trials, neither should they complain to those who serve as instruments. If instead of bemoaning, Spiritists were to thank God for being put to rest, they should also thank the hand that offers them an opportunity to demonstrate their patience and resignation. So this is why it's so important to study Spiritism, because the more you study, the more you understand what life is from the 10,000 foot view, where you look upon, you look upon your life and there's a little path down there that looks smooth to you because you're so far from it. And yet when you're on that path, it's rocky and it goes up and down and around and it's full of obstacles. But when you look at it from your spirit body, it's just, as Allan Kardec says, it's just one point in time. And in fact, in some NDCs, there's one person that had a near-death experience, NDEs, I should say, and he saw this person, talking to another spirit, and then the person went to the earth, and then came back a couple of minutes later and says, "Yeah, that was a tough life." I mean, it gave that person an idea of how short really our time is here in our physical bodies as we go from life after life. Now, of course, it's easy for me to say that. We all understand that being here in our physical body, a day can go on forever, a week, a year is like an eternity for us, right? Trying to save money or trying to get out of a bad relationship where you have to do it slowly is tough. But sometimes you just kind of need to go back and, breathe in and understand that everything here is temporary, and that when you're back in the spirit world, all that will be left behind, except for your brain, right? Except for your character and your personality. And this is why it's so important, as Allan Kardec says, is don't show them rancor, don't be mean to them. And if you can get to the point where, it's good to get to the point where you don't say anything bad, right? If you just keep your mouth shut, don't have bad gossip, that stuff is great. But if you can actually get to the point where in your mind, for that person who betrayed you or the person that caused you, bad time at work, to say, look, okay, God bless you. I hope things go well for you. I know you're being used for a purpose for my learning, and I hope everything's good. I just, hopefully I can stay away from you, right? But I don't wish you anything bad. If you can replace your thoughts with that, you have made a major, major victory on earth. If you can get to that point, you are so far above what most other people on this planet. Because besides, look, let's think of this for a second. Think how you were as a teenager or a young adult, and someone did something bad to you. Now, hopefully many of you aren't like this, but I was, is you would spend your time thinking how to get revenge and how you hated that person, and you would daydream about all of this. And it's all garbage, right? It doesn't help you. It just makes you a lesser person. But that's what you would spend your time on. You ruin your time, and you did nothing but send bad thoughts to the other person, so then they probably even feel even more, against you. So this is why, if you can really change the way your brain's wired, it is amazing victory for you. Now, I'll carry on with what Allan Kardec says, as he says things much better than I do. The Spiritist still has other motives for being indulgent towards his enemies. Yeah. In the first place, he knows that evil is not the permanent condition of mankind. This occurs due to the temporary state of imperfection. And just as children correct themselves of their defects, so the evil man or woman will one day recognize their errors and so gradually become good people. The Spiritist also knows that death is only a relief from the material presence of the enemy, because this enemy can continue to pursue with hate even after even after leaving the earth. They also know that the vengeance, let me drink some water here, which was seized on, fails in its objectives, as it has a contrary effect of causing even more irritation. So let's talk about that for a second. There is this great book, and I forgot the name of it. And it was written by the guy that was worked with Chico. They on the weekends they'd come and they'd stand in line with Chico. Chico would meet people and greet people, and he'd give them little stories about Chico. And then one day, these two people came, mother and father, and they said, Chico, our daughter, I think she was manic depressive. She was, hallucinating, all it really meant mental problems. And they said, Chico, what can we do? And he said, go help people. Whatever you do, try to help people. Well, now, what Chico knew is what this daughter, she was being obsessed by spirits who were trying to get revenge on something that she must have done to them in a previous life. So he said it was 6 months, I forgot how long, it was quite a few months afterwards. They came back to Chico, may have been a year. And they said, Chico, our daughter's much better. And he goes, well, what did you do? He goes, well, we went into prisons and we talked to prisoners about Spiritism, and we tried to help them any way we could. And so then after everything was done, Chico went and talked to the person who wrote the book. He said, look, this is what happened. These two people went and helped prisoners, right? They helped the people in prison. They were trying to give them any, sustenance and advice they could. And what was happened is the mothers who were in the spirit form, right? And they're probably in the umbral or the lower zone, saw these people helping their sons in prison. And then they noticed that other spirits were attacking their daughter. They spirits who were on the same level as the ones attacking the daughter went to them and said, look, these people are helping our kids. Can you stop, trying to get revenge on their daughter? And they stopped obsessing their daughter. This is like everything is connected here. So this is why it's so important to reconcile, right? Because just as Allan Kardec said, is vengeance can go through many, many lifetimes, and it has, right? You've all read, examples of that in Spiritist literature. You want to stop that. So this is why, and you want to stop it. Not only do you want to have revenge, but that person who's seeking revenge on you, you want it for their favor too, because they're wasting their time. They're wasting eons maybe trying to get revenge in incarnate or discarnate state, and all they're doing is hurting their own path to perfection. So it's bad for everybody. So let me continue on what Allan Kardec says. They also know that the vengeance which seized on fails in its objective, as it has a contrary effect of causing more irritation, which is capable of continuing on from one existence to another. It was up to Spiritism to prove through experience and the law which governs relationships between the visible and invisible worlds that the expression extinguish hate with blood is radically wrong, and that in fact blood only feeds hate, even in the afterlife. It is therefore up to the doctrine to offer a positive reason for this fact, together with a practical motive for forgiveness and for Christ's commandments. Love your enemies. There is no heart so perverse that it will refuse, even though reluctantly, to show itself to be sensitive to good behavior. Through good comportment, it is possible to take away all pretext for retaliation and, who knows, even make a friend out of an enemy, before and after death. Before and after death. Through bad behavior, man only succeeds in irritating his enemy, who then becomes the instrument which God's justice will use to serve as a punishment for those who are unable to forgive. It is always possible to find enemies among both incarnates and discarnates. Our enemies in the invisible world manifest themselves in their malice by means of obsession and subjugations, as can be frequently seen. These represent a kind of trial, which, as in other types of trials, helps in the process of advancement. And for this reason, the sufferer should accept them with a certain amount of resignation. These happenings are also a consequence of the inferior nature of this globe. For if there were no evil people on this planet, then there would be no evil spirits around it either. So let's talk about that. So, why are we surrounded by good, bad, and indifferent, and sometimes downright, maladjusted spirits? It's like we have to live in this, this public junior high or middle school, as we call it, right? And anybody's been in that know that they're all surrounded by all sorts of people, and you just try to survive what you can. So why is that? Well, that's all part of the process of us purifying ourselves. There's a lot of layers to this. First is we're told over and over again by Spiritism is that we improve ourselves by the white heat of pain, right? Like we go through like we're a kiln, right? And we're getting the imperfections fired out of us, right? And that happens through hard trials. Look, everyone has gone through emotionally wrenching episodes. And truthfully, haven't they been the ones that have caused you to change? Have you ever made a big change when you were on the beach drinking with an umbrella, right? And you were all relaxed? Did you ever make this big decision? It could have happened, but regularly it does. You don't make this big decision to change your whole personality and your character. You may make business decisions, but you don't make deep changes in your heart and your behavior without stimuli, right? So the spirits all around us, they provide all the stimuli we need. Now, how does the spirit world, how do they fight evil? Well, it's so smart. Now, when we think about fighting evil in our movies, we think of the good guy with a gun killing all the evil people. Now, would that work? Because all that we do is just take them from incarnates back to discarnates, and they'd come back again. That doesn't work. Spiritism, it tells us that the spirit world fixes evil with evil. And this is why we have the lower zone. This is why we have the umbral. When these people who were very bad on earth, they go where people, because of the law of affinity, right? Because if you look at the law, the karma and the law of affinity, those things really work well. So the law of affinity, based upon our karma that we accumulated in our life, places us where we should be in the spirit world. So if you were a pretty rotten person, you took advantage of others, you didn't care, you treated people like dirt, well, guess what? You don't deserve to be in heaven, of course. You go somewhere where you're going to be treated just like you've treated other people. And just like everyone else on earth, there's always someone superior to you. And so these people who were probably little dictators in their own little personal life now go to where there is a very bad person in charge of a city or whatever they're in to treat them like they treated others. Now, it's not there forever, right? There's no eternal hell, but they will experience what it was like to be that mean to other people because other people would be that mean to them. They will eventually change their attitude and say, no, this is not the way I want to live. Hence, evil is, yes, it's like someone commented, like a refiner's fire. Exactly. You're taking out, that's a really good way You're taking out impurities, right? You're removing impurities. And that's what's happening. And so it happens here in our physical world, also happens in the spirit world. Now, we are told that if you really want to change your character, the best place to do it is here on earth, because we're set up to be these kind of emotional antennas, and we really get the stimuli is very effective. Now, if you can get so far and you're out on one of the levels of heaven, quite frankly, right, you're doing a job you love, you're with people who are nice to you, but you still have defects in your personality, right? Because this is a long process to purify yourself. Well, it's hard to make basic changes there because your life is wonderful. So then that's why people who are in heaven, once they get in heaven, they say, okay, I'm in heaven. I'm not going to reincarnate anymore. I'm done. Well, and of course, you don't have to reincarnate. You can stay there as long as you want. But you still have certain, bad behaviors, or maybe not the behaviors you want. And you come back to earth and you get those taken out, right? And you help plan the trials and tribulations to modify your behavior and your character, your personality to a certain extent. That's how this whole process works. Then people go higher and higher levels of heaven. So let me carry on with Allan Kardec says. Okay. Hence, if we are benevolent with our incarnate enemies, we should also treat those of them who are discarnate in a like manner. In days gone by, it was a custom to make bloody sacrifices of innocent victims in order to appease the hellish gods, who were none other than evil spirits. These fiendish gods followed on after the devils, who are the same thing. Spiritism shows us that these devils are merely the souls of perverse men and women who have not yet disposed of their material instincts, and that no one can succeed in appeasing them except by sacrificing the hate that exists, that is to say, by being charitable towards them. This has the effect of not only stopping them in their evil practices, but also of recovering them and bringing them back to the path of goodness, thus contributing to their salvation. In this way, the maxim, love your enemies, is not circumscribed to the earth, ambient, and the present life, but rather forms part of the great universal laws of solidarity and fraternity. That is so true. Imagine these ancient societies, the Aztecs who would just go through and do bloody sacrifice after another, bow, all these things, back in the times. And they weren't actually doing anything. They were just giving pleasure to those lower spirits who wanted that to happen. But they weren't going to say, oh, good job, now you're going to be rewarded. No, that doesn't work. They were doing that just for them to get pleasure with no reward for the people doing that. In fact, it was all counterproductive. Just like in school, if someone bothers you and if you ignore them or try to say good things to them, you stop them in their tracks, right? First of all, I know by trying to bother you, it doesn't work. So why? Just like as Allan Kardec has said in other places, if you can ignore the spirits who are trying to give you bad ideas, they will finally just go away because it's not working and you're no fun. This is why another reason to study Spiritism is to always think of ideas that are coming to your mind, because a lot of ideas are not your own. They're just being planted there. And to filter that by your conscience and say, nah, I'm not going to do that. That's not honest, or that can hurt somebody emotionally or physically. And that's not going to be there. Eventually, those spirits that are trying to make you do stupid things will say, oh, that person's no fun. And that's exactly what Allan Kardec is telling us. Now, the next thing he goes on is, this is, whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And this is in Matthew chapter 5, 38 to 42. You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, ye resist not evil, but whoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And whoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. give him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. So this is what Allan Kardec writes. The prejudices of the world with respect to what is commonly called a point of honor produces the kind of somber susceptibility which is born of pride and the glorification of one's own personality, which in turn leads mankind to return an injury or offense with another. This is taken as justice by those whose moral sense is still embedded in worldly passage. This is why the law of Moses prescribed an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, in accordance with the epoch in which Moses lived. So when Christ came, he said, return goodness for evil, and added, do not resist the evil that they wish to do to you. If someone shall smite thee on thy cheek, present him the other also. To the proud, this teaching seems cowardly because they do not understand that it takes more courage to support an insult than it does to take vengeance. This is always due to the fact that their vision does not go beyond the present. So let's talk about that for a second. And this is another great revelation was that Spiritism tells us is that when the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament, and other things, Buddhism and any other types of prophetic messages from the spirit world, they are given to people according to the level of their culture and technology at the time. In Moses' time, if Moses said, no, love your enemy, they weren't ready for that. They were ready for an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It was a much more primitive time. No one would have, if Moses said that, they would have said, no thanks, right? And Christ, there's a lot of things he wanted to say, but he was bound by what is possible to get people to change. You can't just come in and say, no, you need to be this way. No, you need to love all your enemies, when a culture was that, there's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. They needed the time of people from the Moses time to the time when Christ came to know that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, it just created more turmoil. They had to learn that at least a portion of society, not all, right? A portion that would listen to Jesus had to learn that it really wasn't the solution. At a time when there was slavery and, that might makes right? Even that's why it's one of the reasons Socrates was killed, because Socrates says, just because you have more power doesn't mean you get to say what's good and bad. The Athenians who were in charge didn't like that, right? No. At that time, if you had the power, you had the right. That Socrates was revolutionary. He's a precursor of Jesus. Everything if you really look at what he's saying, a lot of it is a precursor of what Jesus Christ came and told us 400 years before Jesus came. And he was here to try to get people to start thinking that way. Now they knew he wasn't going to be successful, right? And even Jesus wasn't successful in the fact that the world changed within his lifetime, and the world still hasn't changed 2,000 years later, but it is changing slowly. For us, it's slowly. And, for the spirit world, 2,000 years just go fast. So it's all about slowly changing people's attitudes and perceptions and their behavior. And all, of course, this makes up our personality. It makes our personality better. So this is why when you read things in the Bible, like, in the Old Testament, they say, go into the city and kill everybody. That's pretty mean, but they were being very directive. No, you got to do what God tells you, because that's how they were. They were like irresponsible, and there wasn't much inner morality in those more primitive souls. I'm sure the exceptions. The New Testament, there's still some things that were mean that you say, but again, as the spirits tell us, the messages of love and fraternity and charity are eternal. The rest of the stuff were encased, right, to help send the message. And this is where Spiritism comes in, the third revelation, telling us that we're ready. Now look, am I going to say that Spiritism tells us everything has happened? No. You can read all the books, by Chico Xavier, Yvonne Pereira, Devoldo Franco, Leon Denis. even they will tell you that we're still being presented only that which we can comprehend. That I'm sure there's many things. In fact, Geraldino gave a lecture on Chico one time, and he said that in one of the books, Boundary Louise, they started talking about how people are picked. So when they go on a flight that that has an accident and everyone dies on that flight, and they started doing, they go, no, don't put that in the book. The people aren't ready for that. Very interesting. And think about that. So think about how our life is really kind of, I hate to use the word, but manipulated in such a degree, because again, they always tell us we have free will. Our free will is really more of our attitude right now on this planet. We'll have much more free will as we go higher and higher planets. But think of that. And you always think, and you always hear if someone gets on a plane, or someone was going to get on a plane, but somehow their alarm clock didn't work, or the taxi never showed up, or they got sick and couldn't make the trip. Well, that person was supposed to be there. It wasn't just by chance. It was, as Carl Jung, there's a synchronicity. It was a plan by the Spirit, which says, is that, no, okay, yeah, you bought a ticket, but you're not going on that plane because you still have years of life to live. This is really eye-opening to know how we are herded, like, kindergartners who can't read, and yet they're herded around. They don't even know they're herded around. They're still playing in their own little world. It's kind of how we are, right? We think we have more power than we do, but when you understand Spiritism, you see how we're all really going through one class to another, right? And people's lives has episodes. If someone's mean to you, like love your enemies. Well, they're going to teach us that, and we're taught that. And then we like when I was at one of my jobs, and I was like a project manager of this project, and this one woman would come, and she was like on this. They would evaluate different things and give comments, and she just tore into everybody. And the way she presented herself, it wasn't nice. It wasn't like, oh, I think this is kind of wrong. It was not nice at all. And I went through, and I was like, oh, but finally I said, okay, look. And I talked to my boss. I hate her. I don't want to work with her anymore because, well, it's tough. That's why you're getting paid. So I said, okay. So then I went and she gave me so many suggestions. I said, look, I went and I talked to her. I said, look, I can't do all these suggestions. I can only do what I can do. This would take us a decade to finish this project. Can we just concentrate on some and then see how we're doing? And it really, and I never thought that she was mean as far as the factual suggestions, that she was correct, right? It can always be perfect, but as we all know, when we have a deadline, we do what we can. But I understood much better, right? And that was like one of the episodes I had to go through, is when someone criticizes your work, you can't, and this is all of us, you can't just react emotionally like, oh, I hate you, get out of my life, stop criticizing me. No, you've got to take and say, okay, what do I need to take a deep breath? What do I need to improve? And then I worked with her, and and we were friends at the end. She still never had that graceful approach. That just wasn't in her, God bless her, but she had good ideas, and she meant well. She never meant to be grading, right? It's just that, but it's just probably her upbringing or something. So that's kind of part of it is we learn that. So as we go from episode to episode, because these things all have episodes, right? And some of them overlap a bit, but it's like you talk to yourself like, oh, why can't I ever relax in my life? Well, you're not going to. You may have a week or two on vacation, but no, when that bell rings, you go to that class and you go through some sort of stimuli that's going to change your personality. And then the bell rings again. And, okay, that part did it take? Oh, no, I have to do it again next life. Oh, it took. Okay, we'll put that in your karma log. You don't have to go through that type of trial again. That's what it is. So that's how you have to look at life. You just almost have to laugh with it. And you have to look at it over, as Allan Kardec says, you have to have your vision go beyond the present. So let me finish here. And actually, we're almost done here. So love your enemies. Let me finish what Allan Kardec said. Should we take then this precept at its face value? No more than the other, which tells us to pluck out our eye when it is the cause of offense. He's talking about love your enemies. If we were to take these teachings to their final consequence, it would mean the condemnation of all restraint, even legal restraint, so leaving an open field for those who are evil by absolving them from any kind of fear. If one were to check their acts of aggression, then very quickly the good would also become their victims. The very instinct of self-preservation, being one of the laws of nature, prevents anyone from offering themselves for assassination. By enunciating this maxim, Jesus does not mean that self-defense is forbidden, but rather that he condemned vengeance. Telling us to offer the other cheek when one has been injured is merely another way of saying we must not repay evil with evil. Mankind should humbly accept everything that serves as a means of weakening his pride. There is greater glory in receiving an offense than in being the offender, of patiently suffering injustice than practicing it, in being deceived than being the deceiver, to be ruined rather than one who causes the ruin. So what is he's saying is that, again, when you say turn the other cheek, doesn't mean we have to be, just lay over and let anybody walk over us. No, if there's a criminal, they should go to prison. But we should not hate them personally. We should say, okay, they played a part, right? And we should say, and I don't want personal revenge on it. No, that's karma will take care of that. So he's just trying to put us all in everything in place. And this is why Allan Kardec, this is why it's so effective to read the gospel according to Spiritism. So I hope this helps. And in fact, if you want to ask more questions about Spiritism, there's a site, spiritismstudy.org, and you can go here and you can make appointments with myself or others, and we'll talk any questions you have about Spiritism. No cost, no nothing. We'll set up an appointment. What will happen is I'll get an email. For instance, if you want to use me or someone else will get an email, and I'll say, okay, how do you, at what time you want to meet, and do you want to talk, via Skype or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, something like that, and we'll go in the path you want to go on and talking about Spiritism or talking about a certain book or whatever, which I have done with quite a few people, and I enjoy it immensely. Now, the next thing is I would also, if you'd like to learn more about the spirit world, I would recommend my book, Heaven and Below, which is the first book of a series of 3. In fact, I have Heaven and Below and the second book, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, are out in paperback, Kindle, and now in audiobook. So you can listen to all of them. And I'm working on the third book. And of course, they are Heaven and Below, Spirits in the Spirit Universe, which talks about what our attributes, how we learn as a spirit, how we go from one level to the next level. And because my thinking is the more you understand about the spirit world, the more you'll understand about why you're here, and the more you'll have a lot less stress of what's happening to you, because you'll understand what you're working towards. You'll understand the power of a pure spirit, of a higher spirit, where thought is action in the spirit world. You'll understand why we're going through this really tough training, right? Getting rid of those primitive emotions. You don't want someone who use the power of their mind to create something, who's not a good person, who's not a stable person. And then my third book is How We Are Guided by Spirits, where I talk about how we are personally guided, how whole cultures and races and nations are guided, and how the earth will approach to become a planet of regeneration, which Spiritists right now are saying we are beginning that first phase of becoming a planet of regeneration, where important people like Socrates and Buddha, what I've heard in Spiritist meetings, are going to be incarnated on Earth. So these higher spirits will become, beacons of light to us so we can learn from you. So I want to thank everyone for being part of our little talk today. Again, remember, we're here every Sunday and we talk about some aspect of Spiritism. I will load this video up on YouTube and BitChute. So this will be on those, and also BitTube. Also, I'm using BitTube for anyone of those 3 platforms. So please subscribe, tell your friends, share this on other Facebook pages if you would like to, and feel free to ask me any question. You go to my blog, NW Spiritism. You can always hit me on the contact, send me a contact with your email, and we can start doing email back and forth. I do that with a lot of people. I'm getting quite a few emails now, and I love helping anyone any way I can to explore Spiritism. So I want to say good night to everyone, and God bless.